Hey guys, my name's Kris Guthridge. I'm a writer and podcaster over at 4playernetwork.com, and these are my top 10 games for 2012. So you may remember earlier in the year there was a lot of talk about Mass Effect 3, particularly the kind of questionable decisions BioWare made with the ending. And if you haven't played the game, that's probably all you know of it, which in my opinion is really a shame, because despite those last 45 or so minutes, I truly believe Mass Effect 3 is a good game. Now, the whole series up until this point has just been absolutely revered by gamers. Speaking as a longtime fan of the Mass Effect series, the third installment was really exciting for me because it was another Mass Effect game. It's another chance to go back into this wonderful world that BioWare has created to interact with these characters that honestly are some of my favorite characters in all of gaming. I mean, like, Mordin is an incredible character, and I think seeing these characters again from the previous installments and having them come back, and in many cases giving them these wonderful farewells and send-offs, was incredible for me. I mean, there were some really emotional moments for me playing through the third installment of Mass Effect. Also, with this new game came a brand new co-op multiplayer mode, which I thought worked incredibly well. Honestly, I think Mass Effect 3 deserves a place on my top 10 list, just being a fan of Mass Effect. This game, though, again, the last few minutes of it were kind of shaky and were questionable at best, the experience as a whole was very satisfying for me. Now, honestly, I wasn't really a fan of the first Borderlands. I appreciated the concept and a lot of the character design and the world that they had created. I saw that it was good, but playing it, actually sitting down and experiencing it, it just never really got its hooks into me for some reason. But when Borderlands 2 came around, I decided I was going to give it a try just for the hell of it. It looked like it could be fun, and it turns out I was absolutely correct. It was incredibly fun. As far as co-op multiplayer experiences go, I think this was my favorite of the year. Not to say that the single player wasn't incredibly engaging as well. I did really enjoy the new characters, the story of this new one. Handsome Jack as a villain has to be one of my favorite video game villains I've seen to date. I mean, just the whole looting and shooting equation of Borderlands was taken to new heights in Borderlands 2, I feel. I feel this game as a whole took a lot of the concepts that I could appreciate from the first Borderlands without actually getting into, and really polished them and brought them up to a level that I just, this time around, couldn't resist. So I definitely think Borderlands 2 deserves a place on my top 10 list. Now, I must admit, I've never actually played any of the previous XCOM games, and I know there is a very wide and devoted fan base to those old PC strategy games, but I honestly was just never really aware of them. So I didn't really know what to expect when I was going into XCOM Enemy Unknown. As a strategy game on console, it was incredibly tight, incredibly well done. I find that usually strategy games for me, especially on console, are very hit or miss, and that's usually from an actual mechanical or control side of things. But XCOM definitely nailed it with this experience. I mean, it's so engaging, so addictive that I just loved every minute of it. And the concept of your fully customizable soldiers and those soldiers having permadeath really invests you in the gameplay. It really makes you think about every decision you're making, every move you make, every shot you fire has a consequence. And if you're not careful and you don't plan out what you're doing, those consequences will fall on your head like a ton of bricks. Like many people, I have been following Halo since Halo Combat Evolved first released on the original Xbox. I mean, that was the first first-person shooter console experience that I can remember just becoming absolutely enthralled with. As a longtime fan of all things sci-fi, Halo just spoke to me from the very beginning. It's futuristic military stylization of all of its characters and its settings really just, I thought, were incredible at the time, and I still do to this day. The efforts that 343 made to almost kind of humanize Master Chief, I thought was a bold decision, but really paid off for them, really engaged me in the story. Halo multiplayer is back as well, which has always been a great competitive shooter multiplayer. A lot of what we love about Halo multiplayer has been retained, along with the addition of new features such as customizable loadouts. Things like that have really kind of tightened the whole Halo multiplayer. Making a first appearance in Halo 4 is Spartan Ops, which is the story-driven cooperative content, which in my opinion has been a very ambitious undertaking by 343 Studios, but I'm glad that they've actually tried to put in the effort. The way it works is every week they release a new episode of a series of shorts, along with 5 missions to go along with that week's story. There's 11 weeks of this, and that consists of 1 season of Spartan Ops. And 343 is also committed to doing multiple seasons of Spartan Ops, which I think is awesome for us Halo players out there. I think it really adds good value to our multiplayer experience. Mark of the Ninja kind of came out of left field for me. I didn't really know much about it. I haven't had much experience with Clay Entertainment's other titles like Shank or its sequel, so I didn't really know what to expect going into it. But I have to say, as a fan of stealth action games, Mark of the Ninja is just a fantastic arcade game. I mean, taking traditional stealth gameplay concepts and putting them in this 2D world makes them so finely tuned and very tight. I mean, you feel so powerful running through these shadows, taking out these armed guards with nothing more than a sword and a couple knives. It's one of those games that when you hide from your enemies, you don't feel like a coward. You feel like you're in absolute control of the situation. It gives you all the tools you need to deal with these foes as quickly and efficiently as possible, and just makes you feel like an absolute badass while you're playing it. That combined with Clay Entertainment's unique visual style, as we've seen in their previous titles, just makes this game one that shouldn't be missed. Being the fan of first-person shooters that I am, it would almost be wrong to let this year go by without making mention of Tribes Ascend. I've been playing the Tribes series since 2 came out back at the end of the 90s, I think. Now, Tribes is unlike any other competitive first-person shooter out there in that it is all about speed. Unlike games like Call of Duty or Halo or any of those where you're just running around, in Tribes, the main form of transportation is using jetpacks to fly around, skis to glide across these hills and valleys, traveling at breakneck speeds. I mean, it's unlike anything else in any other shooter out there. The fast-paced, just frenetic action of Tribes is absolutely incredible. That combined with the fact that many of the game's signature weapons actually fire slower than your average gun, so it really forces you to hone your skills. I mean, marksmanship is absolutely key in a game like Tribes. And this new Tribes game, Ascend, is, not a minute too soon in coming, in my opinion. I've been waiting for a new Tribes game for years now. Honestly, the last one, Vengeance, was okay, but I really wasn't that impressed with it. But this new one, Tribes Ascend, I feel like has gotten right back to the roots of the old Tribes game, has really brought it into the 21st century. I just cannot say enough about this game. Honestly, FTL has to be one of the most addictive roguelike games I have ever played. In it, you command a starship and its crew of anywhere between 3 and 7 or 8 individuals through 10 sectors of space, trying to get to your final goal, to beat the final boss at the end. It's a very simple setup, very light on story, as many roguelike games tend to be, but the gameplay of it is just so engaging. Every battle, instead of playing out like a dogfight, actually plays out more like a strategy game, where you have to position your crew at different stations in your ship to power different systems. You are running your ship's weapons, shields, you're distributing power through your ship, trying to keep all these different plates spinning at once while you're fighting enemies. And it, the permadeath nature of this kind of game really makes you stop and consider every move you make. And oftentimes you're presented with very difficult choices. Do I risk a crew member to beam over to this hostile space station to get these resources, or do I just keep moving on even though I'm low on fuel? These constant decisions that you basically as a starship captain have to make. And as a lifelong fan of Star Trek, a game like this really speaks to me. I feel like I almost wish this game had been a Star Trek game. Now, I must admit that developer Capcom and I have rarely seen eye to eye. However, this year's Dragon's Dogma has to be one of the best action RPGs I've ever played. It does such a good job of combining combat aspects from like action adventure games with that sort of satisfying questing and world exploration that RPGs are typically known for. The world itself, Grancis, is large and it takes a while to move around, and without any sort of readily available fast travel, it quickly becomes a bit of a challenge getting from point A to point B, especially when the world is inhabited by all sorts of bandits and goblins, and especially giant monsters. Which, honestly, encountering these giant monsters is one of the most memorable things about this game. And on top of that, Dragon's Dogma has a very unique party system, which it calls the pawn system. So unlike classic RPGs where you had a party where you would have 3 characters, where you decide everything that they do, every move they make, every spell they cast, in this game they give you domain over an NPC character called a pawn. However, you don't actually make every minute-by-minute decision for that pawn. They kind of act slightly autonomously from you. Now, if you're connected to the internet, just that whole idea of other people being able to hire your pawns and you can hire their pawns gives this game, that is a decidedly single-player game, a very good sense of community. A sense of teamwork. Even though you're not actually affecting each other's game directly, you do have some input in other people's gameplay experience. Assassin's Creed 3 is another series that I have been a fan of since the beginning. I've always been excited by a new Assassin's Creed game. Now, was the game glitchy? Yes, it did have some problems here and there. But for some reason, for all of its problems, for all of its glitches, I kept playing it. I kept going back. I couldn't not play this game. For its faults, in the end, I think we're still left with an incredible game, a very worthy installment into the Assassin's Creed series. The new setting in the Revolutionary War in colonial America is amazing. It's so engaging, so interesting. It hardly makes me miss Renaissance Italy at all. And another thing that I've always really enjoyed about the Assassin's Creed series ever since Brotherhood has been the multiplayer. It has been so unique, so unlike any other multiplayer game that is out there. This idea of players hiding in anonymous crowds, sneaking up on one another, trying to perform these perfect kills. A game that is very much not about quantity, but all about quality. It is a thinking man's multiplayer experience, and I absolutely love it, and they have taken that multiplayer experience to new heights in Assassin's Creed 3. I think this game will continue to be one of my favorites for years. And that brings me to my #1 game of 2012, Dishonored, by Bethesda and Arcane Studios. Now, in a sea of all these really good sequels and continuations of previous storylines, Dishonored really stood out, not only because it was a fantastic game, but because it was a brand new world, a whole new IP, this new universe for us as gamers to explore and enjoy. But it's not just the world, it's not just the unique steampunk styling of the game that caught my eye. The gameplay mechanics, the actual stealth mechanics of the game. Being a fan of stealth action games, I found the gameplay in Dishonored to be incredibly satisfying, especially for coming from a first-person perspective, which for games that focus heavily on melee combat, like Dishonored does, has traditionally been a tricky prospect. But I think Arcane absolutely nailed it here. Pulling off your perfect kills feels so good in this game. This is another one of those games where being stealthy and hiding from your enemies doesn't really make you feel weak. It makes you feel oddly like in control of your situation. You decide what happens. You set the traps, you take your time, and when the moment is right, you strike, and they never know what hit you. That sort of experience is just the epitome of what I look for in a satisfying game. And in a year that saw a very disappointing Hitman sequel come out, this game almost kind of picked up the torch and ran with it. This game received so many different awards and nominations, and I think it deserves every bit of success that it's seen, and I can only hope that we see many more Dishonored games set in this world to come. Alright, and that's my top 10 list for 2012. Be sure to check out our website, 4playernetwork.com, where you can check out other articles and reviews. Also find links to our Twitter account and our Facebook page, and you can follow me on Twitter at Inspector Kris. Alright, thanks for watching, guys.